All right, I'm here with Lyn Ulbricht. We're here to talk about her son Ross Ulbricht's case. He's been incarcerated now in a cage for 5 years as a nonviolent criminal, as an
Over
offender.
five now, by the way. I'm
Over
sorry.
five. Oh no,
Yeah.
that's cool. Feel free to jump in anytime, Lyn. Make make my
Well,
statements
every
more
month
accurate
counts.
anytime you want.
Every month counts when you're sitting in a cage.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So your son's case has gained new momentum because you guys took the case history, took all these disparate documents, took all these different quotes and pieces of evidence, and showcased the pseudo evidence that was offered. That's one of the most interesting things, and you put it into an audio and video series. It's called Railroaded. People can find it, and I encourage everyone to watch it. If you want to pause the interview and go just take in the case history and then come back because you'll have more context, or if you want to listen to see if it's interesting enough to take like 6 hours of your time, then you keep going. You keep going. Don't hit pause. So the idea is that Railroaded is the case history illustrated, made easily accessible for people to dip into. Whereas before it was reading a bunch of court documents and clicking on a bunch of attachments. Now it's been made super user friendly. And when I first heard it, because I've heard it many, many times at this point, and I'll disclose that I'm not going to give the spoilers up front. I might ask Lyn a couple questions to which I know the answers already, but for you, the audience, you need to hear the question in order to understand some of these answers. Railroaded is an epic series. Sadly, the protagonist sits in jail under terms of harassment, discouragement, control, manipulate. There's a whole bunch of things that go on in the prison system that are just not a friendly thing. That's why it's a discouraging place to go, especially if you're an innocent person who has had evidence trumped up against you, evidence fabricated, rules of conduct, rules of law, rules of evidence collection, all these things broken, thrown out the window. And he's an unwitting participant in a script that was devised by government before the evidence was actually collected. So there's a whole bunch to unpack here, but what I want to convey to the audience is that there is this case history. It's called Railroaded. You can find it at freeross.org/railroaded. You can find it in YouTube form, or you can have it in audio form, or there's text form with a whole bunch of references and footnotes, and everything in the case history is taken from the court documents, is taken from the evidence, is taken from the government's official story. And only when you hear these things all in context together can you realize that that story is totally unbelievable, and that people who think that Ross Ulbricht is a kingpin who deserves a double life sentence plus 40 years or whatever this ludicrous sentence was that was handed down to a non-violent criminal. It's just there's a lot to it, which is why I wanted to have Lyn here to explain and answer some of these questions and help to just show some of the finer points that are often lost in the public conversation about this case. Because again, the people who believe that Ross is a criminal are just repeating the government's story. And I bet they have never reviewed the government's story to understand how ludicrous, how contradictory, how irrational, how against the grain of justice the entire narrative is. And that's the thing. The Railroaded case history is a narrative. It is a story, but it is not what the government has depicted to the public. That's why I think it's important. So, Lyn, after 5 years, more than 5 years, we've got this new momentum. What has happened in the last couple months since Railroaded has been released? Have you gotten more press? Have you gotten more interviews? Have more people signed Ross's petition for clemency, which we'll get to later?
Well, we've had a great push with the petition. We have close to 126,000 signatures now. My goal is 500, but we're doing well. I mean, signatures are coming in every day. And, you know, it's a lot of them are people who just feel like this sentence alone is so draconian and really un-American and wrong that, you know, they're going to sign this petition because it really puts us all in peril to have a sentence like this. There's already so much excessive sentencing in this country. There's so many people being warehoused in prisons at taxpayers' expense with these ridiculous sentences that never happened before the drug war. I remember, and there's been a quintupling of life sentences to give a nonviolent, young, first-time offender life for something he did on a computer when he was 26 years old, giving him no chance of redemption or any hope. And by the way, in the 80s, they took away parole. So any federal prisoner has no parole. Life means you die in that prison. It used to be that after 30 years of good behavior, you could be eligible to be released. Now we have old and very ill inmates languishing, no threat to anybody at this point, and at great taxpayer expense. I mean, this is very expensive to have sick people in prison at these numbers, but there's no parole. So so we're really working for this petition. There's no guarantees with a petition, but it is a good tool to show support, to show the president, because we're asking, it's a commutation petition. It's saying, please commute this horrible sentence. It's showing the president, hey, 500,000 people, 500,000 people support this, and you would gain a lot of support. And please, by commuting Ross's sentence, and please consider it. Not only for that, but because it's right, because this sentence is evil.
Well, I think it's evil. I mean, you pointed to a bunch of problems. So it's not just about Ross's case. It's not just that you're the mother of a prisoner. It's about the fact that the facts about how your son got incarcerated point to a much larger and deeper and more proliferated problem than just your son's case. The prison system, which has turned into a type of gulag labor camp system, where people who are nonviolent, who have been accused, and the evidence has not been presented in a lawful, legal way that would live up to the standards of the law, the judicial systems of the past and the precedents of the past, are no longer, being considered relevant. There's things like vicarious liability, where your son's being held accountable for the actions of other people, not that he took. There's the questionability of his participation in the things that they even accused him of, and we can get into that in a minute. But there's also the political agenda. Ross is not a prisoner because he's a criminal. He's a prisoner, and this is going from quotes I read in the court transcripts by the judge. He's a prisoner because of his political philosophies. He's a political prisoner, in the words of the United States court and judicial system, right? So this case has so many layers to it, and this interview basically just shows you, hey, there's an onion that exists, and you can start peeling the layers by going through the case history. Speaking of the onion, the part of the case history is this thing called the onion router, better known as Tor. And if I recall from doing research on what was the origins of Tor, it started out as the United States Naval Intelligence Project in league with the British, because the NSA aspect and the GCHQ aspect are very, very much connected, like Siamese twins. So U.S. Naval Intelligence has Tor so that their spies can log in from various places without being detected. That then gets repurposed. What was built with taxpayer money. So they make it like, oh, well, Ross was this kingpin and he used these surreptitious technologies to access deep web, and they just make it all. They don't tell you. It's like, wait, taxpayer dollars created all that infrastructure. He was an entrepreneur with a libertarian philosophy who said, hey, maybe people should be able to transact without government in the middle. That's basically the problem he solved. The government was very scared of that. And from a top level, when they became aware of it, they're like, we need someone to hang out to dry for that. Now, it wasn't find the person who's actually involved, because they don't work that way. They usually work with that person. We can talk about that in a minute also. But they needed a patsy. They needed somebody, a sacrificial lamb, any of these types of euphemisms that you can bring to it. But somebody who's innocent but is plausibly the candidate you can put in a cage for a long period of time to use to scare other people away. It was a sentence that, from going from the court transcripts, it was a sentence that was issued out as a deterrence to others. Oh, where else have I seen these tactics used in the U.S. government? I've seen them in IRS hearings. There's a whole bunch of different ways that it's not about finding truth or if you're innocent or guilty. It's about setting a precedent to control the actions of other people through putting one or two people in a cage This has gone on. Mumia Abu Jamal. There's a guy who's life sentence, can't see people. He's questionably innocent of the crimes he was accused of if you take in all the evidence and not just one side. And yet that goes on. And there's been a movement to free him for decades. And just now they're allowing him like to access the medical treatment and stuff like that. So the problems in this country are not limited to Ross's case, but Ross's case is like a keyhole through which you can see into this other room. And this other room is the deep state. It's the top-down manipulation that is not coming from individuals representing people and deciding to take actions as a nation. It is a superstructure that is supra-governmental, international, and has an agenda. Some of the people who participated in that agenda were people like Senator Chuck Schumer and his what was it, U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara?
Preet Bharara, yeah.
Can you give us a little back?
The judge was recommended by Schumer to the bench.
Catherine Harris.
It was a little bit too cozy there. The other thing is that Ross had nothing to do with New York and the Southern District. He was lived in or was arrested in California, and he was never offered any kind of jurisdiction. He never granted to leave that jurisdiction, and he wasn't advised to do that. The judge didn't tell him to do that, but somehow, and he didn't know.
Okay,
he was
so
brought back to New York and the Southern District.
Ross was arrested in California. He was living in San Francisco. He was in a library. Was it October 1st, 2013?
Yes.
He was downloading the Colbert Report.
Correct.
He was chatting. Somebody chatted him. Duryagan, the FBI agent, was across the street, undercover agent, posing as Cirrus on the Silk Road. He chats with Ross. He gets him to log on, do a couple things. Then they swoop in and arrest him. The part that you just mentioned, I didn't have in my notes, but I remember thinking about this many times, so I'm glad you brought it up. He's like extradited. Like the whole jurisdiction of the whole thing is changed, and all of a sudden now it's New York City. It's not just New York City, it's the Southern District of New York City. Why? Oh, Chuck Schumer is a senator from New York, Democratic senator from New York. Preet Bharara is the guy who's down there, Southern District of New York. Catherine Harris is the judge that Schumer put on the Southern District of New York just for this type of purpose, to make him like a headline, they got their guy type of case and busting the Silk Road, right? So from the get-go, Ross is participating in this whole thing without the understanding that there is a governmental superstructure that has agendas, and they're seeking candidates to fill in these agendas. So when Ross gets arrested in California, then they just pull some strings. They're like, bada bing, now it's in New York. Now it's in New York. What's the Southern District of New York? They have a show, I don't know if it's on Showtime or HBO, it's one of those channels, called Billions. You can check it out because one of the characters is the Southern District of New York, right. And then he goes up to U.S. Attorney, and then you just see how the whole thing's done by payola and favors and blackmail and the whole thing, how they get there. So now I'm not saying that's reality. I'm just saying reality is not that much different than that artificial script, right? The art is what they created. The art is the lie to tell you about the truth, right? So watch Billions. No, that's not literal, but that's how it works. That's the mechanism. That's the methodology. That's the principles, the absence of morals, the absence of integrity, these people just shaping the world, like that Karl Rove quote. They're writing the script, and while we're studying this BS script that they write, like in the case history, the whole thing's BS because that's their story. We're studying that, and in the meanwhile, it's like people involved go free and become very wealthy, and then people who didn't cooperate so much, they end up in prison, like a couple of the federal agents who were caught stealing Bitcoin from the Silk Road investigation while they're working to incarcerate your son. But that's not brought in as reasonable doubt in the case. That's not exonerating evidence. All this exonerating type of evidence, that's not admissible in court. And all that's in there is a bunch of stuff with questionable integrity of chain of custody and evidence collection and broken protocols just all over the place. I mean, these guys were not going by the book. They were writing their own book as they went along. They were handed a book by somebody else, and they said, here's the new book. Here's the script on this case. It's not actually find out and investigate. They're like, they did all the things wrong when they seized your son's laptop. Everything they could have done wrong with that piece of evidence was done wrong. And then it was admitted as like, this is without question integrity-based evidence, and your son will serve a double life sentence for this.
Yep.
It's just
Let me just address
Kafka-esque.
a couple of
Go
your
ahead.
points.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you made a lot of really good points. I could just sit here and listen to your analysis of the whole thing, really, because it's very smart. First of all, Schumer was a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee and the Banking Committee. And he's also, of course, completely entrenched in Wall Street and the financial powers in New York. And I believe that it was Bitcoin, this upstart new currency that they couldn't control, which alarmed them so much and why they came down so hard on Ross. That and his philosophy, as you mentioned. Yes, the judge did say, we know that you created this site for philosophical reasons. And I'm just not sure that's a philosophy you've left behind, in total violation of the First Amendment. But in any case, that philosophy is very much wrapped into Bitcoin. And, that was Ross's motivation, was freedom and privacy and making a change in what was obviously a trend of the surveillance state and government interference. And he was right. It's gotten even worse since he was arrested. So he was right to have that philosophy, in my opinion. So in any case, this was the motivation. And I was very much convinced of this after I saw the other sentences of the other Silk Road defendants who actually sold drugs, which Ross did not. And he wasn't accused of that. And the biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years. He has the same offense level as Ross. They have offense levels in the prison system. It's the same. He got 10 years. Ross got double life plus 40 years. I think there's more than drugs involved here. And this is a political persecution, like you said. The other thing I wanted to point out, because you said they have their story, is there's a book that Nick Bilton wrote that is, saying it's the definitive book. And he tried to get me involved in this book. He wrote me urgently. He grabbed me at the courthouse. He really wanted my involvement in the book. And I was warned by someone who knows him, don't get involved in that book. It's going to be the government narrative. And then later, that same person who I trust and who is an eminent person, I mean, everybody would have heard of him if they knew who it was. He said, I know that the government fed Nick Bilton material a year before trial for this book. He's a government shill. And I've just the parts I've read where he's describing things, I'm like, that is the most distorted, misleading thing. Because I was there. I mean, these are personal things. I can just give you a quick example.
Please.
He said, Ross was this, strange troglodyte living in a basement, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was in that basement. It was at Penn State. He had bought the house. The basement was a finished basement, carpeted, nice, with an office. And, it was a basement. Okay. But it wasn't like Ross was some kind of weirdo freak. And, that's just one little example of what journalists do all the time.
They took it out of context. Nick takes that out of context. Okay, so for example, I went to Penn State. Bill Binney went to Penn State. So we would all have some tangible experience with what it's like there. Yeah, people live in finished basements because that's student housing in a house that has 3 other floors of people living on it, right?
Which Ross owned and was renting out to other students.
Yeah, but Ross is an Eagle Scout. So if you paint out that Ross is an athletic person, he's an Eagle Scout, he's charismatic, people like him, right? He had a lot of friends in the free world before he was incarcerated. So there's this purposeful distortion by removing facts. I called it the neglected aspect. But in this case, you have neglected evidence, you have exonerating evidence, you've got these false statements by government stool pigeon type of creative writers applying their own sick ideas to, it's like you take the facts and you apply those ideas that Nick puts on there, and it's it's a distorted view. That's what you just said. You just said he's putting a lens on there that gives you inaccuracy instead of accuracy. It's a lens of distortion on purpose. That's why he was hired to do that. That's why he got funding for his book, promotional, etc., marketing, all that stuff that goes into it, right? Okay. So, the status of the book did that book have Curtis Green in it?
Yes, and Curtis Green objects. He said that well, he's got all kinds of objections and is very upset about it. Also, Ross's girlfriend, who's featured in it, said she thinks it's propaganda and terrible. And so Curtis, I believe, has come out publicly against it. I'm not positive. Pretty sure.
Okay, so
And
for folks in the audience, Curtis Green was a one-time admin of the Silk Road Project, and at one point, the allegations of murder for hire were leveled against Ross, and the allegation was that Ross had ordered the murder, the death of Curtis Green. Okay, so that was never presented at trial. Those charges were dropped. There's no evidence of that. And Curtis Green recently said what on a public interview regarding that whole situation?
well, he tweeted that he doesn't believe it was Ross. He also said, yes, there were many DPRs. I was DPR once. He also said that he would donate proceeds from his book to help us. And I asked him on an interview, we were together on an interview on the Crypto Show, and I said, so would you feel in danger and worried if Ross were out of prison? He goes, absolutely not. I said, would you want to have him over for dinner and talk? He goes, yeah, I'd love to. This is the supposed victim, the alleged victim of Ross.
Yeah. The target of a kingpin.
Yeah. Doug, does this ever happen? It's just, and he's a top level admin. He wasn't just an admin. He was one of the top people in Silk Road. He has a lot of inside information and knew how it was all running. And so that's a whole other thing because they never charged him at trial, as you said. The jury never ruled on it. There was no evidence presented, yet the judge permitted the prosecutor to wax eloquent about, yeah, we have no proof, and yeah, there were no murders, but just believe us, just trust us. He did it, with no, this is like...
Well, it's a tactic to discourage other people from helping you out and coming to your aid. Oh, Ross was accused of hiring a hitman to hit Curtis Green. So he's a murderer. He's a bad guy. You can't don't aid the bad guy, right? So that's a tactic of discouragement.
It prejudices the jury. It prejudices the jury right there in the trial room.
Right.
He was allowed to say all this to the jury.
And normally you can't do that because it's not being admitted as evidence. It's just an empty accusation that was later dropped, and that proves it was a scare tactic. And Curtis Green, the alleged target, he doesn't think that was Ross. He thinks that was one of the other Dread Pirate Robertses. So let me break that open for people because, Lynn, because you're so close to it, you say DPR. I know what you mean. So the idea from Princess Bride was, everybody, because we've all seen that movie, Dread Pirate Roberts was a mythical character that can be embodied by different people at different times throughout the story. So they can be handed off from one to another. So there's not one. So when Silk Road is created and there's this Dread Pirate Roberts idea, it's like the idea of a super admin that can control the site, someone who has control to facilitate the site. And because what Ross had, envisioned, he didn't have the technical skills to code. He had to work with a whole bunch of other people to build the project. And at one point, Ross becomes interested in other things, wants to move on from that project, and it gets handed over to other DPRs, Dread Pirate Robertses, who are the admins. One of these logged in after Ross was incarcerated, proving that he's not the only one. That's reasonable doubt. When you're saying that DPR is Ross and there was only one, that's antithetical to the whole idea. The government needs to watch The Princess Bride and learn what that whole angle was, but I'm sure they understand it. I'm sure somebody has explained it, and they don't care because they're not looking for the truth. They're looking to uphold an idea that they had, that they could put somebody in prison, take down the Silk Road, scare everybody else away from that, and keep their monopoly on the drug war. Because there's they need their trophy.
They need their trophy. It's like the head on the spike of the medieval castle. That will happen to you. It didn't work. The day after he was sentenced, there was a proliferation of deep web markets. And in fact, now There's a lot. I think there's like 16 big ones, and apparently they don't care. I mean, or I don't know. Are they doing anything about that?
Or
I mean,
they are co-owners, or they're co-owners.
They're co-owners.
I mean,
and I doubt they had the kind of ethical restrictions that Silk Road did, which we can talk about. But I just want to say before we go on to that, because I'll forget. First of all, by the judge letting the prosecutor go on and on about this planned violence, she allowed the jury to be prejudiced against Ross, just like everybody, so many people were when it came out in the media. And the media loves that stuff because it's sensationalistic, it's clickbait, it's great. Then she used it at sentencing to justify this draconian sentence that she's giving. And we challenged this, we meaning Ross's defense team, but one of the top law firms, if not the top law firm in the country, Williams and Connolly, the case was taken up by their lead attorney for Supreme Court cases, Cannon Shamagam. Fantastic person, fantastic lawyer. He challenged this he said it's a Sixth Amendment violation for a judge to take into consideration something that a jury has not ruled on. This is why the Sixth Amendment was written, to protect the accused from rogue judges who decide, well, wait a minute, who cares if 12 people, my peers, have ruled on this because I think otherwise. I believe the prosecution, so I'm going to use this to put someone in a cage for the rest of his life. This is a violation. It's been going on, apparently. I didn't even know this in the courts for decades. It's terrible. It's a complete violation of our justice system. And I brought it. The lawyer said, oh, yeah, you know, and when we were protesting that they were going to do this at trial, I said, they can't do that. And he goes, oh, no, they do it. He's just very, It's become, this shredding of our constitutional protections has become like acceptable. You know, these various points are acceptable. Just like the First Amendment being violated by her revealing her true hostility towards this philosophy of, by the way, voluntary interaction, no force, free market. And I do want to mention what was not allowed on Silk Road. All of our protections are being eroded. As far as what was allowed on the site, what was mostly sold was user amounts of cannabis. By far, there were hard drugs sold. They were, I believe, 1%, something like that, or each one might have been 1%, something. It was a tiny. Yet marijuana was, of course, is becoming legal. It was never mentioned at trial. There are also many legal goods on there, electronics and books and art and raw milk and all kinds of things.
It was like eBay. And what couldn't you sell on the Silk Road? That's the most important. What couldn't you sell?
So what you couldn't do, because it was based on a philosophy of voluntary interaction and no force and no harm, really, no trying to harm somebody with your item, no child pornography or anything related to pedophilia was permitted, no weapons, no assassinations, no stolen property. There's a whole list. It's on our website. You can read. It's right in the trial transcripts as well, from Jared Deryagan, who was on the case for 2 years and thousands of hours. These things were not permitted. Now, these other sites, I have no idea, but what I hear is that it's just open season. Whatever, anybody who's hurting someone else and children, they can just put it up there. It's fine. But Ross is the one taking the brunt for this whole thing and sitting in a cage. And he would never hurt someone intentionally. Never.
It's also worth mentioning that I saw a Reason magazine article a couple months back, maybe a year back, and it was about how the FBI had been running like 23 child porn sites on the deep web, on the dark web. They're owning child porn sites. Now, they claim it's for luring people in. I would claim they're doing it for blackmail. Yeah, they're luring people in. Do you see busts coming out of that? Do you see public, hey, they caught all these people? No, they're just blackmailing. That doesn't seem good. It's like Silk Road didn't allow that, but the FBI has a speciality section for that.
Yeah, well, in that, are you thinking about the Playpen case? Or there's one case?
I would have to refer to the Reason article.
Okay. Well, there was a case called the Playpen, nice name, case, which was exactly that. And they were all after them and did keep it open, and all of a sudden dropped it. And they're like, well, we didn't want to reveal our tactics. And I'm like, or maybe you had some really high level people saying, you better not do this.
Yeah.
It got dropped. And it was the same deal. Are the people who run Playpen liable for what's going on Playpen?
The other aspect of Ross being imprisoned for his libertarian philosophy. Now, he didn't come up with these ideas that Catherine Forrest is imprisoning for on his own. He learned them from Ron Paul, a congressman from Texas. He learned them from hanging out with young libertarians at Penn State, right? Didn't he actually meet Ron Paul through some young libertarian group? Can you just drop that for the audience?
Yeah, no, and he and through that also he got very passionate about Austrian economics and all of that. He actually, as part of the Penn State Libertarian Club, brought Ron Paul there and got a lot of support. He contributed what he could to Ron Paul's campaign. He went door to door with signatures, getting signatures to get him on the ballot. He was very passionate about freedom, liberty, all of that. That's what motivates Ross. It's not, oh, I think I'll be a drug kingpin and make a lot of money. He was living in a flat in San Francisco, sharing with 3 other roommates. He didn't even own a car. And the thing is, he believes in voluntary interaction. Does this sound like El Chapo to you? Does this sound like Pablo Escobar to you? Because some kingpins, and I have a whole list of them, I think it's on our website, have lower sentences than Ross, and they are involved in killing, all kinds of horror, as well as drug trafficking. And they have a shorter sentence than Ross, like 25 years, 30 years. I mean, it's absurd. And they know he's not a kingpin. And in fact, the prosecutor, as I believe is in Railroaded, used the kingpin charge as a threat to him.
Yeah.
And it's a last minute deal that they brought in, said, hey, we're going to add kingpin, and we're still going to recommend life to the judge, but then you'll get double life, and you'll get, and so they piled that on. So anyway, yeah.
It's the antithesis of justice, because it just shows if Ross had been violent, if he had killed people, he would have gotten a lesser sentence. If he had dealt drugs on a mass scale, he would have gotten a lesser sentence. But because he held up ideas of libertarian philosophy and Austrian economics and von Mises and Ron Paul and these other ideals that he was formulating as a young man growing up in America, where we're supposed to be a free country and have the ability to express ourselves in an entrepreneurial effort, right? Where it's not taking anyone's freedom, it's not stealing anyone's property, it's not violating anyone's volition. That's it. And the government said, there's the perfect patsy to fit and fill somebody else's, the real criminal's shoes. So in this case, you mentioned Jared Duryagan. Could you just give the audience a little bit of background on him as a United States federal agent who's investigating the case? Because of all the characters involved in this story, I thought that he brought the most integrity, and I was like, this guy's actually doing his job, and he's finding out who it is, and he is being prevented in every way from actually taking action. And that's why your son's in prison, because Duryagan gets stonewalled again and again and again. Could you just provide a little bit of that aspect for the audience?
Yeah, and this all came out in trial on the 3rd day of trial, and then was suppressed by the judge when we returned after a long weekend. And all of this was stricken from the record, but it's on Railroaded with the transcripts. Duryagan was in the Department of Homeland Security out of Chicago, and he started the investigation into Silk Road and was the lead investigator, and was on the site undercover for 2 years and thousands of hours. And he actually testified in trial. I heard him with my own ears saying that he believes there were many Dread Pirate Roberts, but he had one particular one that he thought was, I guess the most prominent, that but was not Ross at all, and that he was pursuing. And there was even, which is Mark Karpelis, and this is in the, this is all public record. I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
No, of course not. I'll say it from the government.
Yeah.
From the government records, The prime suspect from the United States Department of Homeland Security from Agent Jared Juryagan was Mark Karpeles. That's who
Correct.
Juryagan was following as a prime suspect, and there was numerous reasons to consider him a prime suspect. Please continue.
Okay. But I just want to be really clear that neither Ross nor I want to accuse somebody else and have them go to prison or something. I'm not doing that. But all we're doing is trying to make this all, where people can see the public record. So in any case, yes. And it did come out in trial that, so they were pursuing Mark Karpeles. His lawyers met. This gets really complicated, but Juryagan asked other agencies in Maryland and New York not to interfere and tip off Karpeles. He was almost going to get him, and then they did. And this was Maryland, where all the corruption was. And they seized, I believe it's over $2 million from Karpeles' account. And one of the corrupt agents apparently was working with Karpeles, warning him of things. And then Karpeles' lawyers met with those agents and offered them a deal. If they would back off Karpeles, they would give them the name of DPR. Shortly after that, Ross was arrested. And they backed off Karpeles completely. He's now, though, apparently they're seeking a 10-year sentence with him. He went to jail after that, 2 years unrelated, and now they're after him again. So,
for more money. They want more of his Bitcoin, Mt. Gox money. He has to pay every couple of years to stay out. And some of those countries didn't even cut him a deal. They're like, you got to go. Was it France? They put him in jail for 2 years or something like that?
Japan. He was in Japan.
Japan, because he's a French citizen. It was Japan that.
Correct.
Right,
He's
okay.
a French citizen.
All right. So it was decided that Ross was the culprit before the evidence was even collected, right? And so the way I see it is you don't decide on the truth and then go collect the evidence for it. You're supposed to collect the evidence and then come up with, here's the prime suspect. Prime suspect, according
to the NSA. Unless you're the NSA.
Well, they're going to enter the story in a couple minutes.
Yeah,
so,
right, go ahead.
Department of Homeland Security, Agent Jared Juryagan, his prime suspect is Mark Karpeles, but he has internal conflicts with other federal agencies. It was out of Baltimore. Was it FBI or DHS, those guys?
They're out of Baltimore.
Was
they
it
were
DHS or FBI?
I think they were DHS Baltimore.
Refer to Railroaded, Part 2 and Part 3 is the part where this is all covered, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, these were all these agencies vying. And, this all came from Schumer.
Right.
Making this high profile, pushing for a perpetrator. Let's get somebody. Let's be the ones that get him.
Who's going to be the hero? These guys are fighting to see. And these guys in Baltimore, they're like, we're already in touch with Karpeles, so we can't let our guy in. Where was Juryagan at?
He's in Chicago.
Chicago. So they can't let Juryagan in the Chicago office get their busts. And they don't want to bust Karpeles. They're working with them. So there's a meeting that takes place between the United States government, intelligence agencies, and Mark Karpeles on the island of Guam, which is a British American intel stronghold, GCHQ NSA. What do you know about the meeting that took place with Karpeles' interests in Guam?
Well, just to be clear, the government denied that, even though it came out in trial. But anyway, they later denied it. Oh, no, there was no meeting in Guam. But all I know is that Karpeles' lawyers, we don't know what happened at that meeting. The judge wouldn't allow the testimony to continue to come out. We don't know who got paid off, we don't know.
But you know what happened, right? You could substantiate it in court, right?
They made a deal. Mm-hmm. And it's DHS, Maryland, all the different. Well, actually, New York was the Southern District. They stepped in later and grabbed the whole thing, but that's what they do. Yeah.
They let somebody else get it to the 5-yard line. Then they're like, let's punch it in. But they also started it, so they initiate the investigation. They let DHS and Secret Service and FBI.
Chicago did.
Oh,
Chicago did.
Well, I'm saying from Schumer's perspective. When does Schumer right? Yeah, so you're right. Schumer and Preet Bharara have this idea, then they don't know about Juryagan actually investigating. The Baltimore office is hip to their idea. They're trying to fulfill the script. They got an outline. They're trying to fill in the lines. Juryagan was messing that up. So they're like, let's push him out of the picture. Let's exonerate and cut loose Karpeles, cut him a deal. Karpeles feeds them a patsy who ends up being Ross. This is how the evidence actually plays out. This is not like a creative narrative on my part. I'm saying from the court documents and all the references, there's like hundreds and hundreds of footnotes and references for the railroaded story. This is what's on the table. So I'm not making a statement about Karpeles' guilt or not. I'm just saying from the government's perspective, they had reason to suspect him. And then all of a sudden the deal is cut. He's cut loose. So what is there, if any, connection directly between Karpeles and Ross? Do they know each other? Have they ever emailed before? Did Karpeles ever work on the Silk Road project?
Not that I know of, except that Ross, I believe, had Bitcoin on Mt. Gox. So
at very least, they had a business relationship that Karpeles may or may not have been aware of.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I know about it, really.
Now let's go to the next step. Government agents, United States government agents are now incarcerated. They are in prison. They are in a cage, likewise, for having stolen Bitcoin during their investigation of Ross's case. During the Silk Road investigation, these guys are collecting evidence and putting Ross in jail. It's not even real evidence, but they're in there. And they're also criminals stealing millions of dollars of Bitcoin. So if that doesn't bring the most reasonable doubt to this case, like the government has already convicted their own people who were involved in the faulty, shoddy, fabricated, concocted investigation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They also had unfettered access to the site, just to be clear. They acted as many aliases, including they had the ability to act as Dread Pirate Roberts, this administrator. They had keys and passwords, and they could change chats and on the forum, on the marketplace, which is evidence, which was later evidence. Yeah, and they had all this ability. And if we go into it more on Railroaded, their nefarious actions. But yeah, and they are now in prison. And the material, the evidence that the prosecutor used to say Ross planned murder for hire, it was a chat with one of those corrupt agents, Carl Force, and taking his word that this chat was actually occurred, that he didn't write the whole thing, that, and this guy's in prison, and we're supposed to believe him? It's just like...
How do we know he didn't just have a chat with himself and then submit that as evidence? There's no way. The government didn't have to substantiate the chain of custody or the digital authenticity or have any experts look at it. It's just believed because the government said it, which again is Kafkaesque. That whole scenario.
Yeah, and I just want to say personally, when I read that chat, I'm like, that is not Ross talking. And also, he types like a techie. He hardly ever uses a capital letter. And he does it real fast, how techies write.
Efficient, streamlined, communicating on the most
perfect thing and the capital letters and this whole thing was like an essay written by an 8th grader or senior in high school or I don't know, whatever, but just all perfect, trying to be perfect. And I'm like, that's very stiff and kind of, I'm like, that doesn't sound like Ross at all.
It sounds like a federal agent trying to be smart. When you read it.
Real, and they both sound like the same person. They really do. If you look at it, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That would be easy.
Okay, so anybody with any type of DEF CON experience knows that if the government has command and control of a site, it can imitate whatever, it can do whatever. And the fact that our U.S. government had command and control access from the top down of Silk Road, and then Ross wasn't even participating, and he had to be given some files and brought back into the fray shortly after they let Karpeles off the hook. They threw Karpeles back, they threw the hook back in the water, but they needed to put some bait on it. Could you talk about how Ross was baited, how he wasn't working on the Silk Road project, and how they needed to put certain things in place so that by the time they arrested him, it's like props. They needed to have props delivered to make sure that certain things were on his laptop that would, supposedly incriminate them, even though they destroyed the laptop basically during their investigation.
Yeah. And in fact, I've been told by top crypto security experts, and William Binney being one, they can plant anything easily. It's child's play on laptops to fit their narrative. What's found on a laptop is very unreliable. I'm not sure of the details of why Ross agreed to help with that. Someday I'm going to ask him and spank him for it. But anyway, whatever. Give him time out. I don't know. Now I'm talking like a mom. No, I don't know exactly. I think that I don't know. I can't say why his motivation, except he did it, and he had access. He had high level access, meaning he could log in when they asked him to.
Yeah, because from my understanding of review of Railroaded, at one point he's not participating, and then he gets asked to participate. He gets sent certain files that are then transferred to his laptop, so that when they bust him, those files were on the laptop that he had at the library and all this other stuff, right? And
right.
then
I thought you were asking me why. Yes, that's right. That's correct. Yeah.
And then there's also the aspect of how they discovered his identity in the first place. The government's official story is that, and this guy's on film too. He's beautiful. He's like, oh, I Google searched it and I found it. And, right? Okay. More plausibly, NSA was running Operation Oakstar, I think is the name of it, Oakstar, which was targeted at the crypto community and tracking all people using crypto. And this was an NSA GCHQ project disclosed by Edward Snowden. And if you look at Oakstar, who would they be targeting? Who would be the person that they would be targeting at that time? Oh, they would be targeting Lyn Ulbricht, which means that they would be doing pen traps and doing all sorts of surreptitious surveillance on him without a warrant, without evidence. They're just doing it because they want to control the crypto space and make sure that it's under their control. So they start collecting all this information, and they know he's not guilty. And they know he's a perfect candidate to step into the shoes of whoever the patsy needs to be. And with that pen trap, they can create parallel construction. So now they can start to map, oh, we have Ross's IP address. Here's all the messages. Yeah, if we send him these files, he'll have it on his laptop. That meets all the criteria we need to apprehend him and arraign him and get him into the legal process. And then he'll be off the street, and we can have Chuck Schumer send us a thank you note, maybe give us a medal. So these guys are all working on the agenda without even, they know from top down, because of the NSA surveillance, because of the parallel construction, because of Operation Oakstar that was spying on the entire Bitcoin crypto community. Again, according to Edward Snowden. But Benny knew this back, in 2001, 2002, before the crypto community was even founded, that these people, the intel community wasn't there to protect us from terrorism. It was there to spy on citizens so that the government can maintain its monopoly. And the monopoly is created by making drugs illegal and then fighting the phony war on drugs. While, just like in Iran-Contra, you got the guy who created the National Security Act, a Wall Street lawyer, Clark Clifford, involved in BCCI, the biggest drug money laundering bank ever to go down in history, which was also a bank of Osama bin Laden. So Iran-Contra, drugs, terrorism, arms, national security, that ties it all together. And if people don't understand that history, then check it out, because you'll understand what Ross ran into. It's not on a public map. It's not given to us in public school. It's not given to us in public universities. You only get that top-down view if you come from one of those families participating in government over a long period of time. But guys like Chuck Schumer, those guys, they know, who to whom they're singing for their supper. And when they appoint Catherine Forrest, and her job is to hand out super duper double life sentences to nonviolent criminals. How many other sentences like that has she handled out?
I tried to find out, and they don't make that very accessible. But our lawyer told me at the time that Ross was her 5th life sentence, that year, and it was only May. And she's notorious for giving extremely harsh sentences. And I've had top criminal defense attorneys in New York tell me she had absolutely no business being a judge, that she is horrendous. And they have nothing but disdain and disgust for her. Thankfully, she retired and went into private practice, where hopefully she can destroy fewer lives. She'll probably make a whole lot of money. And that is kind of what prosecutors and I guess some judges do. But she I don't know why she retired. She never really said. She's young. She's 54.
Because the judge,
I thought she was.
The position as judge is just the initiation to the higher level. And now that she's done her work and been obedient as a judge, now she gets to be part of one of those big firms and rake in millions and millions of dollars, because being a judge is only lucrative from the power you can wield from the decisions for somebody else's political interest. again, that show billions. It's not reality, but it does show you a template of how reality actually goes on here in the early 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, thankfully she's off the bench. She is really awful, and so in any case, and yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the part where the federal agents, they snatch up Ross, they go to his apartment, they've got Ross's laptop, now they have access to evidence in his apartment, they're going to have like the mother lode of all this evidence to prove the Silk Road, so they're going to be very, very meticulous, very careful, they're going to go through and tag and bag everything has chain of custody, nothing's been touched, nothing's been tampered with, there's no extra fingerprints or digital fingerprints or deletions of all this stuff, right? That's the ideal situation. Now can you explain to the audience what happened when those guys got that evidence?
Yeah, and I'm not the most technical person, so I'm just going to tell you really a dumb version. But Thomas Kiernan had the laptop. He had it for up to 3 hours with no oversight whatsoever. Nobody knows what happened to the laptop during that 3 hours. This is totally against protocol. And in fact, the other agent who was involved admitted at trial, I heard him with my own ears again, that he broke protocol, didn't follow the guidelines. They crashed the computer. They did all kinds of stuff. You probably understand it better than I do. It's a whole litany. I've had tech people read it and go, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable." And then, what ended up in Preet Bharara's hands and in the Southern District was a copy of a copy of a copy.
And it wasn't even a real copy of a copy of a copy. It was altered copies of copies. Because here's what I can say. The description in the railroaded audio and video probably part 2 or 3, they're covering that in there, is impeccable. And it lists in long form the egregious missteps that should have led to Ross's immediate, dropping of the case, exoneration, go about your life freely, we're sorry. Instead, all these things
shouldn't have used the laptop and evidence.
Yeah, instead, all these things are covered up. All these things that if they happen to your son, if they happen to you, you would not stand for it. And that's why Lyn's not standing for it either. Nobody should stand for this because it's happening to many other people. This is not an isolated case. This is protocol. This is systematic. It's being done from the top down. That is not how America is supposed to work. So here's the situation. In a forensic investigation, you acquire the laptop. Only certain people would have access to it. They would be overseen. They would record their actions. And they would try to get a digital fingerprint of the drive, like a unique, just like a image copy that's like authenticated, time coded, whatever they have to do for their forensic, details, right? Instead of doing that, they let some amateurs play with it. They use a program to try to do the disk printing, the disk image copying and fingerprinting of it, digital fingerprinting. It's called DD. They call it disk destroyer because it often ruins the evidence, right? So they're using this thing 3, 4, 5, 6 times. It's not working. And they're obviously, the reason it's not working is because it's destroying the disk. That's why it's not working, right? They're destroying evidence. But they keep mucking around. And I said to my wife at one point, I said, at any point in this story, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, and then so-and-so gave it to his friend, Carlo, and he messed around, because it was just like, it was like a team of monkeys, like handling the evidence. And I don't know if that was on purpose or if it's total incompetence, because in this world, it is such a fine line between people who are just totally incompetent, like the government, or people who are totally conspiratorial, like the government. Like those two things interact. It's like if it's a government undercover agent or the person's just an idiot. It's hard to tell, right? So in this situation, you got a bunch of these guys, and they don't know up from down. Evidence is being deleted. Duryagan said from his initial looking at the evidence coming from Ross's apartment that there was evidence of Karpeles and there was evidence of Karpeles deleting data, like trying to cover his tracks. That I recall specifically. I think it's from part 3, where that's in the railroaded discussion of the case study. Right. So there's like everything that could have been done wrong on the collection of evidence and the custody of evidence, the authentication of evidence, making it evidence. If it doesn't have those things, it's not evidence. It's not supposed to be admissible. And instead, all this, for lack of a better term, all this clusterfuck is taken and then presented to hang your son out to dry. I'm sorry, I didn't have a better word for it. I thought about it too, and I was like, no, I'm going with it because that's the truth. You know, this pisses me off because this is happening not only to Ross, but this is happening to everybody. The precedents that are being revealed, right? They're taking their mask off in this case, and the precedents that are being revealed apply to all of us in an adverse manner. We're being adversely affected. Our kids, our grandchildren, will definitely be adversely affected if no one brings this to the attention of somebody who can do something about it. And at this point, having exhausted appeal processes and going to the Supreme Court and all these different things, your option right now, the card you have to play is presidential clemency, presidential pardon for Ross. And I think that's a good card to play because all the people that put Ross in jail, all the people that put him there and framed him up and incarcerated him and have stolen 5+ years of his life were Democrats, part of the Obama administration. Preet Bharara, Chuck Schumer, Obama, Eric Holder, all these guys that are involved and had skin in the game to have the bringing down the Silk Road are all political enemies of the man who's in power and can change it with the stroke of his pen, right?
That's right. Mueller, don't forget Mueller and Comey.
Well, who can forget those guys? And let me just say for the sake of the audience, James Comey, he's been FBI director. He's been in the news a lot lately. James Comey was put on the board of directors of HSBC, the biggest drug money laundering bank in the world, right? It was an opium laundering bank for the British back in the 1800s. HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. They got caught laundering drug money for the cartels, and to punish them, they put James Comey on the board to be like, we're going to have this guy oversee. Now, then HSBC gives $81 million to the Clinton Foundation. And then James Comey goes to the FBI, becomes FBI director, and he's investigating like the Clinton emails and stuff like that, right? So there's all this stuff, and that's not presented on mainstream news. The reason why is because more people would be like, wait a minute, it doesn't make any sense. So they have to make up these political narratives that they spew through the mainstream media, because if you knew the truth, you'd be like, wait a minute, it doesn't make any sense. There is what do they say? Conflicts of interest? Is that how they say it? There are conflicts of interest that aren't being declared, but are very well provable and known. But they're not being declared, and people aren't being told about them. So most people don't know about them, but the people on the level of setting those guys at the table across from each other, they know about those. That's why Comey's
sitting. The media does what it's told. A lot of the media, not all, but a lot of the media is their handmaiden. Well, they will just absolutely say what the government tells them to say. So that becomes the story.
That's why it was called Operation Mockingbird when the CIA was using those, mouthpieces, and they never stopped. That's the whole thing. It's like they never stopped. Yeah. Washington Post never stopped being an outlet for CIA propaganda. Bezos owns it now, but how did he get his money? From providing CIA contracts and government contracts, right? From playing ball. That's how he got it. So Ross's case, the murder for hire charge, we talked about that. That was dropped. That's no longer. But that's usually if somebody is against Ross's case and they're like, oh, he should be in prison because murder for hire. Well, those people don't consider the evidence, and they didn't need evidence to make their decision in the first place. So that's kind of the problem we have in American society, is that so many people can think they know something about something without ever asking any questions, without ever putting in any work, without ever thinking about it. They think they can know stuff. They just take what the media says and go, well, I've read that somewhere, and I've had people say, well, he's serving a life sentence for murder. I'm like, A, nobody was murdered. B, he was never charged or convicted of anything to do with murder. What are you talking about? Except that they remember kind of reading it. And it's pretty unbelievable. It's scary. It's terrifying, actually. When you think about how many people believe what they're told. Well, they're parroting. They don't even have to believe it. They aren't even thinking about it enough to believe it. They're just parroting. And
they're experts. They know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could spend days on Twitter I do spend a lot of time counteracting these absurd claims.
Right, because it's
I've got kind of given up. It's just,
The Romans had a term for it. So it's been going on for thousands of years. We're probably not going to end it during our lifetime. But it's called citicism because the Latin word for parrot was sitta, P-S-I-T-T-A. So citicism, P-S-I-T-T-A-C-I-S-M, citicism is the parroting of things we don't know to each other. It's like the epitome of ignorance, right? So that's why I wanted to get that out there. So when people are throwing that at you, first off, know that you can lead a man to knowledge, but you can't make him think. So you can say something to them that's reasonable and logical and evidence-based, but the best you could do is probably just throw them a question that they can't answer and let that be a splinter in their mind, and maybe it'll ignite and they'll say, wait a minute, I don't know that Ross is guilty, right? I don't know that, so where's the evidence for that? Instead of saying, oh, I know he's guilty because I heard it on TV or Rolling Stone or the hit piece on BBC or this movie or that, whatever, right? Framing him up for public consumption.
Well, another thing is that even if he were guilty, which he wasn't convicted, I don't believe he's guilty, he says he's not. But even if he were, the typical sentence for murder for hire without a victim, without a murder, is 10 years. So, you know, the sentence, even if he were guilty of everything they say, doesn't add up to 2 lives plus 40.
No, it doesn't.
It's out of, it's like, it's so out of the ballpark of anything that is, you know, normally given.
But that's also a good line of thought. Even if he was guilty, let's say like El Chapo, let's say Ross is like an El Chapo dude. Even if he was guilty, the El Chapo characters always get off on those technicalities. Oh, you guys didn't collect the evidence. You didn't read the Miranda rights. They get off on technicalities like it's like systematic, like it's a production line. And yet, somebody who's not that type of character, all those inconsistencies, all those contradictions, all those just like in the face of liberty and justice for all things, just, you know, pissed on. They're like, no, this guy's guilty. He's kingpin. Believe it. We don't need to give you evidence. We're the government. Believe what we say.
Exactly.
That is not American. That is not American.
Un-American. And just to bring up, the guy who admitted to running Silk Road 2, which the government called in their indictment identical to Silk Road, only bigger. It sold more drugs in a month and had more listings. He never did time. Blake Benthall is a free man. He was released from prison 13 days after he was arrested and disappeared. So my question is, if Ross is so dangerous to society that he needs to be kept in a cage for the rest of his life, we're not being protected from Blake Benthall? And I'm not saying I want him in prison. I'm just saying, come on.
Blake Benthall probably had himself a secret Bitcoin account because he saw what happened to Ross, and he knew from seeing what happened to HSBC that if you pay the government 10% of what you're doing, they'll let you go. Because HSBC got caught for money laundering, and the fine was like, here's 10% slap on the wrist fine, and they paid a couple $2 billion. And according to HSBC whistleblower John Cruz, whom I interviewed, he said that billions of dollars went missing, and then no one knows where it went. So this is like literally. So Ross's Silk Road, let's say it had a valuation at the time of 1.8 billion, right? Take 10% of that, that's about 180 million dollars. What was his sentence? Had double life sentence plus 40 years plus a fine. How much was that fine?
It was 183 million plus change, whatever. But that was what they evaluated as the sales on Silk Road, and they were saying he owes them that. They did seize Bitcoin off his laptop, and we were able to have that applied. So now it's 140 something million. You know, it's all abstract. It doesn't, and it's a joke.
They're just like, if you come up with your 10%, son, we'll let you out of the cage. That's what they're hoping. They're hoping that he had some secret Bitcoin wallet, and at some point he'll be like, okay, let me out. But he didn't.
I would have been happy to pay.
You'd have known about that. Like, he'd tell you and be like, hey, get me out of here.
And also the thing about the Bitcoin on his laptop is that Ross was buying Bitcoin when it was like 25 cents.
Right.
He was very involved. He was telling me how excited he was about it, and I didn't really quite grasp it. But I said, well, should I get some? And he goes, well, it's too volatile, Mom. Don't get any, which is I really regret. But in any case, he had tons of Bitcoin, and he was working on creating a Bitcoin exchange and doing other things. So they never said the Bitcoin on his laptop they never proved it was from Silk Road.
Right.
And of course, Bitcoin appreciated tremendously.
During the time they stole it. Right. So they stole thousands of Bitcoins that he bought for 25 cents a piece. And when they stole them, what was the price range around then?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm terrible about stuff like that. I'm not sure. It was worth a few $1 million for sure. I don't know how many. I'm not sure how much it was worth.
It's in the case history. The case history saves you from having to. to remember all
I'm
that
sorry,
stuff.
my brain is just overloaded with, I'm not good with the numbers. But because all I focus on is justice. I want my son out, and I don't remember a lot of the numbers. But yeah,
It's a
it
lot of
was
money. That was the point.
it was a lot of money, true. But I forgot what I was going to say.
It was enough money that these guys risked their careers as federal agents and ended up in prison because they were so bad at what they were doing. They got caught because they're working around a bunch of other people who probably said, you didn't cut us in on that, and that's a no-no.
Well, there was a third corrupt agent, we think. There was, besides the Dread Pirate Roberts login after Ross was arrested, after trial, it was discovered that there was another agent that was selling Dread Pirate Roberts information about the investigation, and then discovered that portions, big sections, right before Ross was arrested, of the chats with DPR were deleted. And in order to do that, you have to have very high level admin access. And so this agent, whoever he is, went in and deleted stuff, and then the full file was found, and it was, but we can't bring it up to unless we get another trial.
Right. So the deleted part was offered at trial. You guys found the unredacted file that shows that they deleted it. It has exonerating evidence that would free your son from a cage, but you can't get a legal forum in this country to let you present that information because of the rules in place, right?
Well, if it's not exonerating, it would cast reasonable doubt, and it's important because it was the weeks before Ross was arrested, when a lot was happening. Supposedly he was being lured back on the site. Supposedly, there's so much sealed, undisclosed, and encrypted material that the government will not release. We had to rely on all public information. I'd love to see what all that is. But we do know from that proof, and the only reason we know is because digging and digging and digging through several terabytes of stuff after trial, stumbling upon this folder.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's not just this one folder. You just admitted that from the court trial, there's a whole pile, a whole room of evidence that is sealed. Yeah. They can't talk about it. What do you think? I mean, I'm not asking you because that'd be, too rhetorical. People in the audience, why would the government have to take a whole bunch of evidence on this case and make it sealed off and no one from the public can see it? Because my argument would be because if that evidence was allowed to be presented, it would exonerate Ross and it would implicate somebody else, probably a government informant, probably someone with whom the government had a contract and confidentiality agreements with. But the hypothesis is not evidence. I'm just saying as long as they lock up that evidence, that looks more guilty than he does.
Right, but nobody knows, In fact, we tried to get some things unsealed, just basic stuff, and the judge wouldn't do it. So why? What are you hiding? What's the deal? It's over. He's in a cage. What's the deal? What are you hiding? And all of the emails with the corrupt agents who are now in prison remain encrypted. They did not make it part of their plea to decrypt their emails. They don't want them decrypted.
Let's talk about the fact that the jury has the right to nullify. It's called jury nullification. If somebody is being accused and brought up on charges and they think they're innocent, they don't just have to say he's guilty or innocent. They can just say, we nullify, we think unreasonable rule. These are extrajudicial rules being brought to bear to incarcerate somebody with a political agenda. They have the right. So was jury nullification brought up? Did the judge say anything about that to warn the jury? How did that unfold? Because I'm sure that there were some libertarian people who wanted to see jury nullification take place and just Ross be set free.
Absolutely. There were posters put up about juror rights. There were people outside the courtroom handing out pamphlets, only advising the jurors of their rights. These are legal rights. And the judge got wind of it, and every person who was up for the jury, she would ask, did you get a pamphlet? And if they said yes, she said, well, have you read it? And if they said no, then they could stay. If they said yes, they had to go, and they had to promise not to. And that was definitely shut down. First day when they were choosing the jury.
just another example of how the legal system works in this country, and how that's not limited to Ross's case. I don't think that was just, they're just trying. Yeah, right. So this is just a stifling of rights in order to maintain control. And when you achieve authority through those means, I don't consider it to be legitimate. That doesn't seem right. But apparently it is legal. Let's talk about another legality that doesn't seem rational or reasonable. It's called vicarious liability, where someone can be held accountable for someone else's actions brought to bear in Ross's case.
Right. Well, if you want to take it out of the internet, Federal Express was criminally indicted by the government for this on this principle, because people used FedEx to send illegal pharmaceuticals. Not if FedEx wasn't doing it. And of course, they've never gone after the postal system. But in any case, that's an example. It's and in the website world, it's holding a web host responsible for everything on the site, whether he knows it or not. And that's like saying Jeff Bezos is responsible for everything on Amazon. And in fact, a mother is suing him, or was, because there was cyanide on Amazon. I don't know that Jeff Bezos even knew there was cyanide on Amazon, but the girl used it to kill herself tragically, and the mom is suing him and the vendor. So that's what can happen. Craigslist is another example. How many crimes have been committed on Craigslist and continue to be, including drug sales on Facebook, all of that. So it's a matter of, do we hold Craig Newmark or Mark Zuckerberg responsible? There have been murders on Facebook Live. There have been jihadist activity on Facebook. Are they responsible? And it creates a very wide criminal umbrella, which is saying it's expanding criminal liability. We're saying not only are you responsible for what you do, you're responsible for what these other people do. And people should, very dangerous, slippery slope.
It should be applied equally, just like you say. If it's applied to Ross, maybe it should be applied to Craig Newmark or Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg. Facebook, they used Facebook to commandeer and organize for the Myanmar genocide. Do you know about that?
No.
People wanted to kill other people, and they used Facebook to organize it. And Facebook obviously was paying too much attention trying to control free speech in America, so they weren't noticing that these people were just getting hatchets and rakes or whatever and going after other people, right? So there's the other aspect we'll get to in a minute. I'm going to have to read this big quote from Bill Binney on the Alex Jones show, and I'm going to have to do that because they banned Alex Jones. And for some people, they're like, hooray. But for me, I'm like, there's 35,000 videos that contain interviews with people like Lyn Ulbricht and Bill Binney and a whole bunch of other people participating in freedom and liberty in American history. And those are just it's like deep sixth. It never happened. It's like newspeak, and it's like editing, and people in the future don't have that for context or reference. And like I said, I'll read that quote in a second when we get there.
Let me just say, people who say, oh, yay, it is a foundational pillar of our freedom maybe they don't care about freedom, but a foundational pillar of our freedom is free speech. Without free speech, then it goes to thought. And you can't have free thought. And it's not about whose speech, it's about freedom of speech. And, it's a very, very troubling trend. Terrible.
Well, I think free speech is really valuable to people who want to be free and be self-reliant and not be somebody else's subject and not be somebody else's slave. But people who have a slave mentality, they cheer. They say, good, that guy was saying things. I didn't listen to him, but I don't like what he has to say. So I'm glad he's not saying them to the people who are interested in that anymore. But I'll use these platforms as long as I can use them to progress freedom and liberty. And Lyn feels the same way. It's like we have to use these channels because this is how we communicate with more than one person at a time. This is how we leverage the internet and make it an asset and not a liability. Because the liability is they have control of the mainstream media, the newspapers, the print, the TV, most of the internet, big, website channels for news. They have that megaphone. And the rest of us are like, screaming through paper rolled up in a megaphone. It's like, hey,
that's right.
Truth going on over here, Yeah. So, exactly. Okay, so the other part was you had numerous amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs on Ross's behalf. You had expert witnesses. You had all sorts of other assets to formulate a defense. Were those allowed to percolate through the trial, or were they stifled and stonewalled?
Okay, well, the amicus briefs were supporting the petition to the Supreme Court. So that was a different thing. And it was from both sides of the political spectrum. It was from libertarians to progressives to, people more in the middle. It was conservatives, just a whole range of organizations. And so that was then, and it was part of it. And it may be what helped us not be rejected the first time around, because we were very hopeful in the Supreme Court because we weren't rejected the first pass, but then they ultimately, didn't seem to be concerned about the Fourth Amendment violations that allows the government to, as you mentioned, have free reign without oversight, secretly, without a warrant, delve into all of our internet activity and use it against us, blackmail officials if they choose, persecute groups if they choose. The potential is there. And the Supreme Court didn't seem to want to address it at this time. And it's all based on the third-party doctrine, which was based on the dial telephone and a ruling from the Supreme Court 4 decades ago, when, a number on a dial telephone is hardly what our phones and computers are now, which is revealing everything about you that they want to. Medical records, political affiliations, sexual orientation, apps, and everything. And they can, as William Binney said in that interview, they can just scarf it up at whim and use it however they choose. So this was really a sad thing. But anyway, so a lot of these organizations supported the petition because it was a way to stop this, to come up to speed on the Fourth Amendment in the digital age, because we're going to lose our protections if we haven't completely already with technology. And the courts are grappling with it, and they don't seem to really want to tackle it. So that's the amicus briefs. And then the expert witnesses, the government had a slew of government witnesses. A couple of those guys were part of it that bungled the computer evidence so badly. They were on the stand. Our lawyer was shut down by the judge as far as really delving into what they did. She wouldn't allow it. She said, well, call your own witness. And that is putting the burden of proof on the defendant, and our attorney called for mistrial because of that, because it's not the defendant's job to prove anything. It's the government's job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The defendant doesn't have to prove a thing in our system. But in any case, so we did call 2 witnesses. One was a tech witness, Stephen Bellavin from Columbia University, who would have explained how open source anonymous networks, you cannot say anybody did anything. It's all anonymous. How timestamps were questionable in the evidence, how just a whole slew of things that were wrong with the government's story, and were never challenged because he wasn't permitted to testify. The other witness was Andreas Antonopoulos, who's a well-known worldwide expert on Bitcoin. He's written books, he's testified in trials, and she wouldn't permit him to counter the government's testimony about Bitcoin, which experts had said was just absurd.
That's
so the jury never understood it, really.
They had been reading Antonopoulos's transcripts through that project Oakstar. He is under surveillance too. You don't think they're going to have the biggest guy in Bitcoin when they're running the Bitcoin surveillance project? It's like, here's the guy running the business, Silk Road, and here's this guy running, educate everyone about Bitcoin, and Antonopoulos, right? So you got those 2 guys. Those are surely targets of Oakstar, right?
Right.
So,
right. It's true.
So what? Just to bring it full circle for the audience, for the benefit of anyone who doesn't speak the techies. In the 1970s, the United States government was tapping people's telephones. And they've been doing this for like 100 years, since they did telegraph lines. So whether it's the British or the American government, they know how to tap this stuff. So by the 70s, they're using pen traps, and that's collecting all your incoming and outgoing phone traffic, numbers. And they can tell a lot from who you're calling, when you're calling them, how long you talk to them, who you called next, who they called next, and they make all these, data sheets out of it to track the bad guys. So in the 1970s, they're using this, and this is like push button or rotary telephone days. And then, fast forward 40 years, you've got the internet, you've got all these new means of communication. Do you give up your Fourth Amendment rights when you use an internet service provider, a cable company, any of these things, a cell phone carrier? Because in the past, you were protected, but now there's all this ambiguity and gray area. So these guys decide that they can use a law from the 1970s pertaining to a different form of technology, and they're just like, oh yeah, we could just capture everybody's everything without a warrant, in perpetuity, selectively sift it or amend it as needed for parallel construction or blackmail. It's like the ultimate form. It's the ultimate form of controlling human beings is what they developed. And that's what Binney says when I interviewed him for those hours. He's like, they're not about protecting us from terrorists. They are about controlling human beings. It's about population control, was his quote. That was his quote when I interviewed him. Let me go to this quote from his appearance on the Alex Jones show. I'm pretty sure this is in the last year or so. You sent me this quote in October. It was October 12th. You sent this to me. Do you recall what interview you had seen? Because Alex had been banned by then, too. He was banned in August of 2018. So even when you wrote this...
Obviously. I think I sent it to you because I was going to appear on your show then, and I thought it was very relevant because it sounds exactly what they did to Ross. And but I don't recall the date. I may have it somewhere. I can find it.
Here's my rendition of that interaction that went on between Alex Jones and William Binney. And if you guys are patient, I might even do an Alex Jones impression when I read his lines at the end. All right. So Bill Binney, and these quotes are paraphrased, but I'm not saying they're identical to what was, because we don't have the source material now, unfortunately. We have the quote. Here it goes. Quote, even when Ed Snowden said all they have to do is use the IP of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and they can go into the database and find all the information. Well, they can do that with anybody. If they can go into the collection database with the knowledge of what their attributes are, phone numbers, IP addresses, email addresses, they can use that to scarf up out of that database anything and everything about them. And it's not just them. Right. So then he's alluding to they're getting their whole network, their whole friend network. Right. You've got all this data that's at your beck and call, and these people can shape it as they need. So he continues to quote, says the other part is what the FBI, DOJ, and DEA are doing with that data because they also have direct access to it. And so do the other Five Eyes. Now, the Five Eyes are the 5 English-speaking countries that share intelligence programs in accordance with post-World War II Anglo-American establishment intelligence apparati. So you have GCHQ, DCHQ, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, all these different places, all these different listening stations. So the Five Eyes have an agreement that while the United States isn't allowed to surveil its own citizens, we'll have Canada or Australia or Britain do it, and we do vice versa. So it's everybody spies on everybody else so that they all share the information. So he's saying because they can do this all over the place, they have access in all these countries that do this to people. And they can get that database through the IC Reach program. This whole thing's a farce. The minimization is a joke. FBI task force, the recent FISA court revelations, the diminished position of Schumer and the related drug cartels. And then there was a quote, Dianne Feinstein said, quote, this program is so useful. We've put hundreds of people in jail with it. We're talking about
Americans.
They're talking about American citizens, that they've used parallel construction, extrajudicial activities to frame people up and then present it as these people left a data trail and they're just dumb criminals, right? They've used the data against them in a court of law, but they did parallel construction, meaning that they fabricated data that the NSA provided because it wouldn't be admissible. It's really subverting our entire judicial system. To have a reliable judicial process, the Attorney General has to address and correct this. Now, when Elliot Spitzer went down because he was going after bankers on Wall Street, this gives you the central point of knowledge and a great deal of power. Either over you or someone you care about, they can leverage it. So it's the old KGB Stasi way of doing things. They'll collect information, and when someone like Spitzer comes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to put you guys in check," they're like, "No, we've been spying on you, and you're actually client 9 at this brothel, and we're going to just release that, even though you're the son of a billionaire and you're a Eastern Establishment scion." They're like, "We'll burn you on the cross right here, son." Right?
Yeah.
So it all just boils down to using drugs as an excuse to support the war on drugs, that the whole thing is built on lies. So when you look at the reason that they're surveilling people without warrants is not for our own safety. It's not to keep the country safe. It's to protect their racket. They have a racket. They're trying to protect it. They're using illicit means, and they're abusing the force that was vested in them through the trust of representative government. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And just a quick example of what they do, because you brought up the IRS agent who claimed he found the Silk Road, Ross's identity, by a simple Google search. He goes, this is after years of law enforcement, journalists, hackers, all kinds of people. Gee, I guess they never thought of a Google search. Wow. This brilliant IRS agent went, well, gee, I'll just Google it. This is their story of how they found supposedly Ross's identity and went after him, when of course it's absurd. It's like a kid's excuse for fun, yeah, right. And yet this is what they do.
But that's the incompetence angle. The government was just incompetent, and this guy just had to do a Google search, and he found it, and he caught the mastermind criminal kingpin, Ross Ulbricht, and case closed, PBS.
He can write a big article about how brilliant Gary, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. That agent is.
Yeah.
New York Times publishes it.
Yeah.
Big picture of the guy. Wow, he's the one behind it all. He found it with a simple Google search. And that's how the media plays into it. When
in reality, Ross is handed to them on a platter by Karpeles, most likely, according to the case history and the documents. That's my opinion. It's not an accusation. Not looking to get, incarcerated because I was looking at a legal document. I'm just saying it doesn't read right, the story they're telling. And when you look at it, it looks like Karpeles feeds him Ross. And then they make sure that Ross has the data that they need to arrest him when they arrest him. It just seems like the total antithesis to freedom and justice and liberty. And it's a total declaration of despotism and tyranny.
And not only when they arrest him, but they kept the computer, and who knows what they did with it after they arrested him. And like I said, a crypto security expert said they can plant stuff in minutes. He sent me a video, an NSA video, showing me how it's done. And no biggie.
There's two things. There's two things with, so you have a crime scene. The evidence has been tampered with. Was evidence that doesn't exist fabricated and then put onto the laptop and used later at trial? Or were the guys who had the laptop and they're off the map, they're off the radar, they're off the reservation, had they participated in some sort of scam or theft or crime that these other two agents were involved in that got caught, but these guys were there to make sure whatever footprints they had were being deleted off there? Because Duryagan says there's evidence of Karpeles related information being deleted off that stuff at the time. As he's trying to see it, apparently they're deleting it at that same time period, right?
Yeah.
I think that was in part 3 or 4 of Railroaded.
In Railroaded. And how will we know? See, there's all these questions, and that's why
reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt, exactly. And another thing interesting along those lines is Curtis Green said that there were things that he had written on the forum and stuff on the Silk Road server. When he went back, he saw things that he did not write. He said, I absolutely did not write that. So there's this whole thing was, put together very neatly, and they got their trophy. But that trophy happens to be a human being, my son. He's a good person. He would never hurt a fly. And there's 100 letters on our website for people who know him saying, testing to this. And to have taxpayer money, basically $2 million per life sentence, go to unjustly caging him is un-American and evil. And we have to push back. It's just, who's going to be next? Like you said, it's just, it can happen to anybody, and it is happening.
the Trump angle with getting a pardon and clemency, is it just about getting signatures on the petition? Is it more about just raising public awareness and making sure there's a public outcry to fight this injustice and to rectify the fact that in America, we're not supposed to have nonviolent people in prison for life sentences, because that's like a death sentence. That's death sentence for a nonviolent crime.
It is. Absolutely is a death sentence.
That's not supposed to go on. And we're supposed to not have political prisoners in this country. That was a thing that they did in apartheid South Africa that was wrong and ended under Mandela, right? So but no, we have it here too. We have it here. And you know what? We're not alone. It goes on all over the world. So if we're like the gleaming light for freedom in the world, guess what? We got our own problems. And maybe we should take care of those problems before we go sending our troops all over the world to take care of everyone else's problems.
Yeah, maybe so.
And maybe there's a political agenda that ties our troops all over the world to those other problems and the people that put Ross from top down in prison. Because I think there are some overarching agendas. The drug war. We're in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history, guarding poppy fields. And yet we have this anti-war, anti-drug war going on over here. It's just like it's contradictory. There's a lot of things in government philosophy, I guess, that are contradictory. And that was probably Ross's point. So as people who believe in freedom and abolition and the absence of slavery and libertarian ideas and Austrian economics and recognize these are good, wholesome ideas, we should all be concerned, very much offended, and very much inspired with a fucking fire under our ass to do something about this, because it's a declaration against people who appreciate freedom, who just want to be left alone and who don't aggress on other people. Nonviolent people just trying to be free. That's what this country is supposed to be about. There's been a declaration from the top down that's persona non grata, for a lack of a better term. Persona is not the idea of it. Idea non grata. That's what I mean. And then there's the other aspect. You've got the crypto hacker type community to see that a government had command and control of a Silk Road website project, and then they say that Ross did all this stuff. It's like, well, that's reasonable doubt. The government, the people who are making the accusation against the innocent man until proven guilty, had command and control and could have made him say whatever they wanted in these transcripts. And, oh, by the way, no one authenticates any of these things. They're just accepted upon the good faith of people who collect information. When there was provable criminals in their ranks who would steal Bitcoin, who would get incarcerated, one guy was Secret Service, right? So it was multiple government agencies involved in the corruption.
Secret Service and NSA. He was working. He was on assignment from the NSA and the Secret Service. He was working for the NSA.
But they don't want anyone to know that, because then that would bring in the parallel construction, et cetera, et cetera.
He didn't even know. It wasn't known at trial. Came out later. Well, he wasn't known at trial. The judge and the obviously the jury and the defense. Nobody knew about Sean Bridges. It was the prosecution did.
It wasn't disclosed at trial, but I'm pretty darn sure those people had their ducks in a row by that point.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying. The jury didn't know.
So this story is not over. It's ongoing. We're still at a point where things can be done that are constructive to liberate Ross. What would you like to call upon people to do? What can they do to support you? What actions can they take? Be very specific. Say, next step, do this, and then next step, do this, and let's gain some momentum, because this is a real situation. This is not hyperbolized. This is not hypothesized. This is looking at the reality and saying, if we want this to change, we have to do something, right? I'm not asking people to understand the whole case history and regurgitate it for people on demand. Just say, do you know about this guy? Do you know why he's in jail? Here's the case history. Check it out and share it with your friends, maybe. I don't know. Come up with your own way to say it. I'm not telling anyone what to say. I'm a voluntary person. But it's a good idea if we pass it along, if we pay it forward.
Absolutely. Well, I can just tell you, I don't know what each step someone should take exactly to help, because sometimes people come up with great ideas that I'm not even, I hadn't thought of myself. Like today on Twitter, somebody said, I'm going to donate 25 cents to every person who signs a petition, or something on his site that they get 25 cents in credit or something. I mean, just little incentives. We had an artist who donated a painting that, a $10,000 painting, and he's going to give us, our defense fund, half of that. And I believe we have a buyer. That's just couple of things. They came up with these ideas, incentives and things. The petition, like I said, it's for commutation of the sentence, to be clear. It's not a pardon. It's not full exoneration. It's to have this evil sentence commuted. This sentence is wrong. And so that's the petition. And it's not hard to agree with that. I mean, this sentence puts us all in peril. This kind of excessive sentencing, this belongs in a dictatorship. You know, it's a death sentence. You're absolutely right. It's a walking death sentence. So please sign the petition. Please share the petition. If you know any students, please see if they want to do a drive on their campus. The other thing is if anyone has political connections, because President Trump is the man who can free Ross. And if anyone who knows any politicians or others that are in Washington or elsewhere that have connections that can talk to him, or even down the road, somebody who knows somebody. You never know where something will lead. And that is one of the things I really could use. Of course, we always need money, because one of the ways the government crushes people is they have unlimited money. Yeah, as we know, they can just print it. But individuals, unless they're multi-millionaires, it's pretty hard to hire the lawyers and do everything you need to do to fight. And we've been very blessed with people who have stepped up to help us, but it's ongoing. But and then we have a Take Action page that has other suggestions and ways to do these things. And if anybody has other ideas of things that will help, insights, connections, as I said, I'm open to that. So yeah, we need help. So thank you.
Well, to recap, the website is freeross.org.
Yes.
Railroaded is found at freeross.org/railroaded.
Or just go to, it's on the homepage, there's a banner, and then there's a banner to the petition. Right up there, really big, so you'll see it.
And while you're on the homepage, join the email list so you can keep posted with the updates and new things that come out about the case. And then that's easy for you to forward and share and post with other people. That's one of the things that people can do. And if you don't have time for that, then you've probably got money to donate. So if you don't have time to do these social sharing and, grassroots efforts, then throw a little cash at the problem, because lawyers that defend Ross take cash. They don't necessarily take. Yeah. Do they take Bitcoin?
They take quite a bit of cash. I've had some take Bitcoin. A lot of them won't take Bitcoin, but that's all right. That's all correct. And really, we need to change the narrative. As you said, we're shouting through a little tiny tube, and they have megaphones, and it's happening through social media. But people need to understand the true narrative, see what's really at stake here.
People need to realize that when the true narrative is being hidden, occulted from you, that is the government taking advantage of you. That's the government taking advantage of you. They're saying you don't have the right. You're not an adult enough to know this. You're not in the adult conversation of how the country is being run. It's an attack on each and every person in this country who participates in this culture that we call America. So that's why I don't understand why you don't have 500,000 signatures already on this. But I do see that it was at 125,000 signatures this morning.
It's pushing 126. It's over that. It's getting to 126.
Slow and steady wins the race, but the clock is ticking a little bit on as far as getting the presidential clemency, because if the Democrats get back in the White House, they're certainly going to uphold the decisions of other Democrats made under the Obama administration. And you're right. It does look like tyranny or despotism, and a lot of people would agree, and they'd be like, yeah, Trump's bad. But I would remind people, this tyranny and despotism was a machination of the Obama administration, of Eric Holder, of Preet Bharara, of Chuck Schumer, and all those are strong affiliates of the Democrat Party structure, which is acting in this way, in this specific case, antithetical to freedom. I could also say in the case of Operation Fast and Furious, Operation Gunrunner, which Holder was in charge of, where they were providing American weapons to Mexican cartels, which came back and killed American law enforcement officers. So I'm just saying, when you start looking into Ross's case, look into these other people: Preet Bharara, Catherine Harris, not Catherine Harris, Catherine Forrest.
Yeah, Forrest. Yeah.
Catherine
And
Harris.
also it's the Clinton crime bill is responsible for more people being in prison than maybe anything else. It's horrible, and Chuck Schumer was very involved in it. But now he takes contributions from private prisons. By the way, just a little aside.
There's no conflict of interest if we allow it. I mean, so the Thomas Jefferson had this quote that the government will, it'll act despotic and tyrannical to the extent that people will put up with it. Now we're getting to the point where people shouldn't put up with it, but they do, because it's being masked effectively thus far by mainstream media.
Yes.
People have the internet. We don't have this paper talking, through the little rolled up tube of paper anymore. We have the YouTube. We're talking through the tube, big tube, going global, future. People see this in the future. It's not just run one time on Sunday night PBS to tell people the propagandized story of Ross Ulbricht. This is the internet, the place where Ross made his name and did his business. And I think there's going to be a lot more people in coming years recognize his contributions to economic libertarian philosophy as well as entrepreneurism. And they'll see that the people that were threatened by that are not the friends of everyone in the audience. It's not our friends that are doing this to Ross. It's the same people that would do it to us. It's the same people spying and surveilling and blackmailing and doing all these other things. And I don't think people should tolerate it anymore. But you can't take effective action until you know what's going on. You can't jump into the play until you know what is going on. And what's going on is there's a high level of government corruption. You can call it the deep state. You can call it what you want, but it is not representative government, and it is not tied to our votes. The steering wheel that we're holding on to as voters is not connected to the wheels on this car we call America.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay? That's a problem. These people would like to see it go off a cliff so they can claim insurance, and we would like to stay alive. What do we need to do? We might need to open the doors and roll out like Burt Reynolds and Hooper. Good movies. Check it out. All right. So to close it up for everybody, the call, you got to have a good sense of humor. Or we won't make it through this race. This is the tortoise mentality. We take it slow and steady, and we have a good sense of humor, and we will win the race because we occupy the ethical, moral, and intellectual high grounds. And the people putting Ross in a cage, they can't do that. They have to use their monopolization on force. They have to use blackmail and surreptitious means, parallel construction, because that's how they operate. Okay, good. Now we all know who's doing what. Let's, see how this turns out. More people can sign the petition, freeross.org, and the petition is on change.org. It's got a real long URL, so just go to freeross.org. Get on the mailing list so you can get the updates and keep abreast and have an easy communication metaphor to share with friends. Just forward the email when you get it. And Lyn, we'll check back with you in a couple months, and we'll get more signatures in the meanwhile. But I wanted to get this since Railroad was such an epic production and there's so much information in it. I just thought that we should memorialize it and let people know it's out there, what it has in it, why they should allocate time in their schedule to listen to it and take notes. Make a list of contradictions. Maybe we should have a contest to who comes up with the most government errors in that case history. That might be interesting.
It'd be a long list.
It'd be a long list. It'd be a long list. It'd be interesting to see, the commonalities that everyone sees, and then the little specificities that only a couple people see, but are relevant and substantial. A lot of knowledge could be gained from that process. And in the meanwhile, when you talk to Ross, you tell him to stay strong. Tell him we're sorry about Schubert. He was trying to groom was an apple seed that he was grooming while he was in solitary.
He'd grown from apple seed, just to have a little life and green in there, but
because he was in solitary confinement at the time, and that's what a kingpin does,
both.
Right?
He did it in both cases, solitary and with a cellmate. But he kept doing it, kept growing them as they, met their demise by being confiscated.
Well,
some people minded and some people didn't. So.
We continue to keep you and him in our thoughts every day. And every time I come into the studio, I got the handwritten letter from Ross over there.
Oh, good. That's nice. Yeah, well, I'm going to see him this weekend, and I know he'll be encouraged. I'll tell him all about it. Thank you, Rich, for your depth of information and on so many things, not just this case and your insights. It's really, and your friendship and support. It's really, I really treasure it. Thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. It's good to have you as a friend too. We hope to see you in person soon again.
Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, you stay strong. Keep your mental attitude positive. Be optimistic. And if you need anything, just reach out, text us or whatever. We'll help you out.
I will. Thank you.
All right.